Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is September 24th, 2020. This is an article about Democrats as fascist collaborators who, while putting up token resistance to the Republican Party, largely have collaborated with and just assisted the Republicans every step of the way with implementing the agenda of the 1%. We call it neoliberalism. Started about 40 years ago, a little bit longer, maybe in the 70s, but officially with the election of Ronald Reagan in 1980, the effort to defund, deregulate, and privatize everything that they possibly could to get away from social democracy and back to laissez-faire capitalism as part of an overall social counter-revolution and pushback against socialism, social democracy, really anything but just totally unrestrained free market capitalism. Democrats, right now, I just put out a video about Bernie Sanders jumping on board the Trump is a singular threat, blah, blah, blah. We got to vote to keep out fascism. First of all, that's not how it works. But second of all, what are the Democrats actually doing? Because right here, we have an article titled from CNN, Congress poised to leave town until after the election without passing coronavirus stimulus. Neat. So it's been almost 2 whole months since the enhanced pandemic assistance checks ran out. That was at the end of July. And for all of August, and now we're almost at the end of September, there has been no replenishing of additional funds. Most people are getting between about $175 to $200 a week. There has been no supplementary blanket check like the $1,200 check a lot of people got back in the beginning. And what are Dems doing? They're just saying vote for Biden because Trump. I'm not hearing anything. In fact, here's what I am hearing. Let's play a little bit of a video to set the tone.
On Friday, I started there early for voting the day that we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
But to be clear, you're not taking any arrows out of your quiver. You're not ruling anything out.
Good morning. Sunday morning. We have a responsibility. We take an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States.
The look on that host's face is just priceless, isn't it? Pelosi is insane. The ruling class is insane. They are letting capitalism go down to, they're just taking it as far as they can push it. Clearly, there's no plan. Bernie Sanders represented sort of a sane attempt at, shoring up capitalism to keep things going by at least, making sure workers don't fucking die outright, that workers have some kind of money in their pocket to keep the economy going with. And the rest of the capitalist class was like, no thanks. We're going to just let this one roll. We're going to keep, letting, the equivalents of derivatives, which are basically bets on bets on bets, just keep going. I mean, and we'll just take this economy as far as we can. Well, and that's where Trump comes in. They just don't fucking give a shit. And the token resistance that the Dems are putting up is exactly that, token resistance. So again, what we're going to do in this story is go into how Congress has failed to fund unemployment benefits during a fucking pandemic, during a once-in-a-century pandemic. They're just failing to do the most basic things for the people. And it's not all on the Republicans. They are just not coming to a deal here. The Republicans actually had a deal. The Democrats refused it. And no compromise apparently could be worked out. They're working together to screw us. So we're going to look at that. And then we're going to look at an article from 2009, actually. My frame of reference for this is the George W. Bush years, which were exactly like the Trump years. They're exactly the same. This drives me crazy that people can't remember back, 12 or 15 years ago. Everything people are saying about Trump now, they said about Bush then, and we're going to read about that in an article. So if you come away from this video still thinking you're going to vote for Joe Biden and it's going to result in some meaningful difference, let me tell you the difference it's going to make. Barack Obama was not substantially different from a Republican in policy. The only thing that the Barack Obama presidency did was it gave people desperate to believe that the U.S. government could change after the absolutely horrifying, nightmarish, shattering 8 years of George W. Bush and the war on terror and the Department of Homeland Security and the Minutemen and all the fucking Katrina and all the crises that happened then. Obama gave hope to like people who stayed at surface level and just wanted to believe. So it was like sort of a morale boost for as long as it lasted. But guess what? Democrats got wiped out across the country. The Tea Party got elected. Birtherism started. The far right grew. And then Trump got elected in 2015, well, 2016, 2015 primary. And here we are now with things not obviously in very good shape. Again, if you like another good recap of the 2000s, go watch a movie, The Big Short. It's, somewhat dumbed down, but a fairly humorous but accurate representation of how much of a casino economy the financial capitalists allowed to develop. And literally the system just cannot keep going. All right, so let's get into this first article. CNN, Congress is readying to leave Washington as soon as this week until after the election and without passing a coronavirus economic stimulus bill that members of both parties, businesses and hard-hit Americans all agree is desperately needed. Comment. About the businesses, I don't have an article here. I saw a statistic in a news story that it was like 60% of small businesses are expected not to reopen. Now, small businesses, yeah, it's petty bourgeois. I've owned a small business. Let me tell you, I didn't make very much money. I basically was a worker who, just had to make sure that like the paint on the walls was fresh. Like I made it the same amount that I made as a worker, but, I got to like air quotes, be my own boss for a few years and like assume tons of extra responsibilities. Now, that's not the case. Plenty of small businesses do make a lot of money and, have employees that they exploit. But honestly, most small business people probably have more in common with your average worker than they do with like the Trump family, for example, or the Koches or the Waltons, something. So point being, small business people a lot of times are living paycheck to paycheck as well. All right. South Dakota Senator John Thune, the second-ranking GOP leader, and Alabama Senator Richard Shelby, the Republican who chairs the Appropriations Committee, said Wednesday they are trying to complete action on a House-passed government funding bill this week. That should allow lawmakers to leave town for much of the month of October and members up for re-election to hit the campaign trail, though they are expected to return to cast their votes to confirm President Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick. The funding measure, known as a continuing resolution, is being shopped around to all Senate offices. Senators and aides said in hopes that they can get unanimous consent to pass it as early as Thursday. That would mean they could avoid procedural hurdles that would otherwise force them to return to the Capitol next Wednesday after the Jewish holiday to approve the bill on the final day of the fiscal year. So comment, today is Thursday. No news yet. I'll update the story accordingly in the comments. Some fiscal conservatives, notably Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, shocker there, are reluctant to give consent to pass these types of bills without being able to offer amendments, and it remains unclear if they will this time. Comment, for anyone listening to this who thinks that libertarians are some kind of alternative to the current system, no, they are an intensification of the current system. Like, everything wrong with the current system, they literally want to deepen it. They want to deregulate, defund, and privatize even more. They want to give even more control to the people who already can't handle the power that they have in the private sector. Come at me in the comments if you have another take on it, but you're fucking wrong. Let me tell you that right off the bat. Thune says he expects the Senate to have pro forma sessions throughout October, something that will allow leaders to call members back to vote to confirm a Supreme Court nominee, or if there is a deal reached on a coronavirus stimulus, which seems highly unlikely at this time. Members of the Judiciary Committee say they expect to be back and forth between their states and Washington as they work to swiftly confirm a new justice. On the stimulus, Democrats and Republicans remain far apart, both in terms of the overall price tag and how the money would be spent. For instance, Democrats are insisting on hundreds of billions of dollars for state and local governments, but Republicans say that it is a non-starter for them. Quote, "The Democrats seem to be saying that we would rather have zero than what we put up," Thune said, referring to a scaled-down stimulus bill that Democrats recently blocked in the Senate. At this point, we're not seeing cooperation with Democrats on a reasonable or realistic bill. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it was Republicans who were being unrealistic. Quote, "We have to meet the needs of the American people. This is not a check the box or the path of least resistance," Pelosi argued Friday about the Democrats' most recent proposal. They have contempt for science and disdain for state and local government. Well, you know, commenting, I mean, yeah, they're fucking Republicans, obviously. I mean, just, you know, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and then there was all these stories about, you know, Democrats trying to get Republicans to do the right thing. You're trying to like reason morally with like lizard people. Like, come on, they're missing that part of their brain. Okay, I mean, I'm joking, obviously, but I mean, there's fucking psychopaths. They're not going to do it. What are you kidding me? How many, you know? But of course, this is the controlled opposition, weak-willed Dems that are fascist collaborators. So, ending the article, the lack of action on a stimulus has rattled Wall Street, worried struggling Americans. I mean, that's an understatement. Struggling Americans. There's like over 10% official unemployment right now. And then there is a eviction moratorium, but there's not a mortgage moratorium or like a rent moratorium. So like all the money still is going to be due. It's just nuts. I did a story on that, I think, last week. And frustrated business owners who believe more government stimulus could have helped them stay afloat and keep workers employed. Yeah, like we can't just pretend there's no virus and we can all go back to work. Speaking of non-starters, that's a non-starter. COVID is real. If you think it isn't, please leave the channel and you can come back. Go read trackthecurve.com for a while. Click around. It's just, I can't even believe we're having this conversation. I can't believe we're having the conversation about, is COVID real? Is it a threat? Even if you don't die from COVID, you can get blood clots. You can get permanent lung and kidney damage. You can get brain damage. You can get all kinds of problems. Do you want to be like winded permanently for the rest of your life? It's not fucking worth it. We need to shut down. The government needs to pay us to stay home. It is that simple, period. Concluding the article, the House is scheduled to be in session next week, but that may change if the Senate completes the government funding bill this week. Well, guess what? I covered this story either it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I think it was a week and a half ago. So it was both. September 14th, I think it was, they were like coming back. And nothing has been done. And they had been gone for like 2 weeks of recess before that. And then they came back and they still haven't gotten it done. Like, what else are they fucking doing? You're planning what country you're going to invade next? Like, you have 330 plus million people in this country who are starving, going broke, in danger of being unhoused. Capitalism is not working, people. The government works for the 1%. They don't give a fuck about us. We're just labor, and increasingly we're just becoming surplus labor. Our lives only have value to the capitalists in as far as they need our labor, and they increasingly don't, which means that if we don't organize independently of that whole paradigm that they have set up for us of capitalist exploitation of our labor determining the value of our lives, if we don't set up an independent socialist system that can fight that and make an economy that is run by us for us, not for profit, but for meeting human need, then more of this is the future. More Trumps, more Pelosi's. They're just going to keep more Buttigieg's. They're just going to keep throwing this bullshit at us. They're going to watch us drown and they're going to laugh. So Democrats are fascist collaborators. They're telling you more and more, We got to vote against fascism. CPUSA is even saying that shit. First of all, that's not how it works. Second of all, you'd be voting. I mean, yeah, I'm going to vote against fascism. I'm voting green, meaning I'm not voting for a fascist collaborator. GOP are open fascists. I mean, their values are horrendous. Democrats work in concert with them. It's good cop, bad cop. So let's go on to the next article. How bad are the Dems? I mean, obviously we can see in this moment how they're failing us. Let's do a little history, and this isn't even going that far back. This is an article from September 1st, 2009, published at Mother Jones, called Bush's Third Term. You're Living It. David Swanson. This is, of course, 6 or 8 months after Obama took power, and by David Swanson here, pointing out the similarities between Bush and Obama. Quote, "It sounds like the plot for the latest summer horror movie. Imagine for a moment that George W. Bush had been allowed a third term as president, had run and had won or stolen it, and that we are all now living and dying through it. With the Democrats in control of Congress, but Bush still in the Oval Office, the media would certainly be talking endlessly about a mandate for bipartisanship and the importance of taking into account the concerns of Republicans. Can't you just picture it? There's W now, still rewriting laws via signing statements, still creating and destroying laws with executive orders, and still violating laws at his whim. Imagine Bush continuing his policy of extraordinary rendition, sending prisoners off to other countries with grim interrogation reputations to be held and tortured. I can even picture him formalizing his policy of preventative detention, sprucing it up with some due process, even as he permanently removes habeas corpus from our culture. I picture this demonic president still swearing he doesn't torture, still insisting that he wants to close Guantanamo, but assuring his subordinates that the commander-in-chief has the power to torture if needed, and maintaining a prison at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan that makes Guantanamo look like summer camp. I can imagine him continuing to keep secret his warrantless spying programs while protecting the corporations and government officials involved. If Bush were in his third term, we would already have seen him propose, yet again, the largest military budget in the history of the world. We might well have seen him pretend he was including war funding in the standard budget, and then claim that one final supplemental war budget was still needed, immediately after which he would surely announce that yet another war supplemental bill would be needed down the road. And of course, he would have held onto his Secretary of Defense from his second term, Robert Gates, to run the Pentagon, keep our ongoing wars rolling along, and oversee the better part of our public budget. Bush would undoubtedly be following through on the agreement he signed with Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki for all U.S. troops to leave Iraq by the end of 2011, except where he chose not to follow through. His generals would, in the meantime, be leaking word that the United States never intended to actually leave. He'd surely be maintaining current levels of troops in Iraq, while sending thousands more troops to Afghanistan and talking about a new surge there. He'd probably also be escalating the campaign he launched late in his second term to use drone aircraft to illegally and repeatedly strike into Pakistan's tribal borderlands with Afghanistan. If Bush were still the decider, he'd be employing mercenaries like Blackwater and propagandists like the Rendon Group, and he might even be expanding the number of private security contractors in Afghanistan. In fact, the whole executive branch would be packed with disreputable corporate executive types. You'd have somebody like John, may I torture this one some more please, Rizzo still serving, at least for a while, as general counsel at the CIA. The White House and Justice Department would be crawling with corporate cronies, people like John Brennan, Greg Craig, James Jones, and Eric Holder. Most of the top prosecutors hired at the Department of Justice for political purposes would still be on the job, and political prisoners like former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman and former top Democratic donor Paul Miner would still be abandoned to their fate. In addition, the bank bailouts Bush and his economic team initiated in his second term would still be rolling along, with a similar crowd of people running the show. Ben Bernanke, for instance, would certainly have been reappointed to run the Fed, and Bush's third term would have guaranteed that there would be none of the monkeying around with the North American Free Trade Agreement that the Democrats proposed or promised in their losing presidential campaign. At this point in Bush's third term, no significant new effort would have begun to restore Katrina-decimated New Orleans either. If the Democrats in Congress attempted to pass any set of needed reforms like, to take an example, new health care legislation, Bush, the third-termer, would have held secret meetings in the White House with insurance and drug company executives to devise a means to turn such proposals to their advantage. And he would have refused to release the visitor logs so that the American public would have no way of knowing just whom he'd been talking to. During Bush's second term, some of the lowest-ranking torturers from Abu Ghraib were prosecuted as bad apples, while those officials responsible for the policies that led to Abu Ghraib remained untouched. If the public continued to push for justice for torturers during the early months of Bush's third term, he would certainly have gone with another bad apple approach, perhaps targeting only low-ranking CIA interrogators and CIA contractors for prosecution. Bush would undoubtedly have decreed that any higher-ups would not be touched, that we should now be looking forward, not backward. And he would thereby have cemented in place the power of presidents to grant immunity for crimes that they themselves authorized. If Bush were in his third term, some of his first and second term secrets might, by now, have been forced out into the open by lawsuits. But what Americans actually read wouldn't be significantly worse than what we'd already known. What documents saw the light of day would surely have had large portions of their pages redacted, and the vast bulk of documentation that might prove threatening would remain hidden from the public eye. Bush's lawyers would be fighting in court with even grander claims of executive power to keep his wrongdoing out of sight. Now here's the funny part. This dark fantasy of a third Bush term is also an accurate portrait of Obama's first term to date. In following Bush, Obama was given the opportunity either to restore the rule of law and the balance of powers or to firmly establish in place what were otherwise aberrant abuses of power. Thus far, President Obama has, in all the areas mentioned above, chosen the latter course. Everything described, from the continuation of crimes to the efforts to hide them away, from the corruption of corporate power to the assertion of the executive power to legislate, is Obama's presidency in its first 7 months. Which doesn't mean that there aren't differences in the two moments. For one thing, Democrats have now joined Republicans in approving expanded presidential powers, and even, in the case of wars, military strikes, lawless detention and rendition, warrantless spying and the obstruction of justice, presidential crimes. In addition, in the new Democratic era of goodwill, peace and justice movements have been strikingly defunded, and in some cases even shut down. Many progressive groups now, in fact, take their signals from the president and his team rather than bringing the public's demands to his doorstep. If we really were in Bush's third term, people would be far more active and outraged. There would already be a major push to really end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan. Undoubtedly, the Democrats still wouldn't impeach Bush, especially since they'd be able to vote him out before his fourth term. And surely 4 more years of him wouldn't make all that much difference. David Swanson is author of Daybreak, Undoing the Imperial Presidency and Forming a More Perfect Union, 7 Stories Press 2009. He was press secretary for Kucinich for president in 2004. So folks who maybe are on the younger side and don't remember 2009, we have been here before. Voting for Biden, it's like, well, Biden was literally Obama's vice president. So you'd be going right back to that general network of people. And as that article demonstrated, not much fucking changed. And also, I want to really emphasize the language there about daybreak and undoing the imperial presidency. That actually, for me personally, undoing the imperial presidency sums up the undoing part, that is. America's been imperialist for a long time, but Bush just sort of took it to kind of a new level with the war on terror, DHS, and like the Patriot Act. That was very unprecedented. That had deep impacts on day-to-day American life for everyone. So undoing it, you know, the liberals had these Bush's last day stickers that were like the countdown to, you know, the end of Bush. And as I pointed out, like, we don't really know who's getting in. Like, it could be worse than Bush for all we know. And in fact, the Democrats, they're fascist collaborators. There's no other way to put it. So you have everybody from, obviously the Biden campaign, Pelosi, Schumer, Bernie Sanders, AOC, all telling you, preserve our democracy, vote for Trump. Or, sorry. They practically are saying vote for Trump. Vote for Biden, preserve our democracy. Well, there is no democracy. The Princeton study on democracy showed that, as I've mentioned in several other videos. And even CPUSA, God bless them, are saying the exact same things. That's actually going to be the next video coming up. Good morning. It's Sunday morning. I don't know what else to tell you. It's Nancy Pelosi and the rest of the insane fascist collaborating and fascist enabling Democrats want your vote. Are you going to give it to them? Go watch my video on PSL versus Green. Pick one of the two, PSL or Green. Vote for them. Voting really costs you nothing. I don't even know that they really count the votes. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they don't. But hey, do it anyway. It's kind of fun. But for the love of God, voting for Biden, it's not going to do anything but be a head fake. It will be disorienting to some of the liberals who, to be fair, it's not like the liberals are contributing much positive against Trump right now. Anyway, they're getting in our way more than anything else. So whatever. Trump wins, Biden wins. It's what the 1% wants in the end. Anyway, we as socialists, we as Marxists need to do what we're going to do. We need to propagandize and agitate the working class. We need to build socialism, join an organization, fight, find something local to you, even if it's just your local Green Party, fight, do whatever you can. But for the love of God, both the Democrats and the Republicans for 20 years now clearly demonstrated it is one unbroken continuity. And if we're going to go back into the 90s, Bush to Clinton, the Gingrich Congress, George W. Bush, no matter who's in power, it's the same fucking agenda. No joke. I wish this was hyperbole. It's really not. There are times I wish, I could just vote for Biden and make it all go away. I, just have to remind myself, there just is no easy fix here. We must build socialism. We must stay clear-eyed. We must keep our eyes on the prize. And my slogan here at Socialism for All, that maybe I haven't been hitting hard enough, I believe we can have revolution by 2030. That's my firm belief. It's 2020 right now. If we have lots of organizing in the next 10 years, starting now, which is happening now, I think that by 2030, we can have a moment, whether it's the beginning. I think it'd be more likely to be the beginning of a process than the end of the process at 2030. But I think if we keep this up now, step it up, keep building socialist organizations, keep spreading Marxist ideas, Marxist analysis, Marxist agitation, by 2030, we can be in a position to have a serious moment. So Revolution 2030, this is Socialism for All. Thanks to our current patrons whose names are on the screen. You can support us at patreon.com/socialism for all for as little as $2 a month, up to a couple $100 a month. Every donation is encouraging, although, of course, the more money I get, the more actual time I can spend on this. So, keep that in mind. You can follow us at facebook.com/socialism for all. I've been having a lot of problems with Facebook, and the feed distribution has been cut. Hopefully that will bounce back in a month or two. I'm on Reddit. Username is Socialism for All. And of course, remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment here on YouTube. Please take this video, share it in your Reddit, Discord, Facebook groups, wherever you are online. Help get the word around. We appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.